you, friends. It's perfectly appropriate that I should speak on a French journalist, a devout man, after hearing Greg Sheridan's wonderful presentation. That was well organised, Carl, to have me following on. Now, I want to introduce Ernest Hello, and I did ask a Frenchman how should I pronounce that, and it's just hello, as we would say. I want to introduce him as a sort of forerunner of G.K. Chesterton, and I'll explain why as I proceed. He was born in France in 1828, almost 50 years before Chesterton was born in England in 1874. Despite these geographical and generational differences, Hello and Chesterton shared remarkable similarities. They were both journalists. They were both devout Catholics, sharply intelligent, superb essayists, and shrewd critics of their age. In addition, both men suffered chronic ill health. Fortunately, each man had a devoted wife. Gilbert had Frances and Ernest had Zoe, whose loving care extended each husband's life, perhaps by a decade or more. There's another similarity between Hello and Chesterton. Neither couple could have children and had to reconcile themselves to that grief. In the third essay, titled Intellectual Charity, in this collection we read, "Now, written speech may be a great charity, and its diffusion, whenever it is true and beautiful, is one of the acts of charity most suited to our time. In many souls a hunger and thirst exists which can only be satisfied by printed words. Between these eager readers and the writer, who should also be eager, a current of sublime charity may be established, since all give and all receive." The reason for this reprint is to satisfy in some small measure that hunger and thirst with the beauty of revealed and natural truth in printed form. The need for this type of life-enriching intellectual charity is as desperate today as it was 150 years ago when Ernest Hello wrote those words. Along with his journalism, Hello published several books of criticism and philosophy, but life science and art forms the best, I think, introduction to his writing and thought. This work hasn't been published in England in English in a new edition for over 100 years. Like Chesterton, Hello understood that an accessible, engaging style attracted readers. He was sensitive to literature and art, and he wrote in a manner that embedded timeless aphorisms in articles that have been overlooked. He was not long-winded. Perhaps his journalistic training alerted him to the merit of brevity. Certainly the pieces I've collected here have focused brevity. Large ideas are encapsulated in at most 5 or 6 pages. Ernest Hello's near contemporary, philosopher Soren Kierkegaard, complained often and loudly that journalists emphasise temporal matters to the exclusion of eternal matters. Gilbert Chesterton in England, Ernest Hello in France, and we could add Greg Sheridan in Australia, are notable exceptions. In England and in France, for Chesterton and Hello, there was a time of accelerating modernity, politely dismissive of Judeo-Christian culture. Both men warned their societies that they would become confused, irrational, and unhappy, but fastidious about faddish values. Hello saw France's long-standing functional religious customs, values and ideas dismantled to allow, supposedly, human flourishing under the rule of triumphant science and liberal politics. He disliked this aspect of his era. He argued against the delusion of assuming that temporal imperatives were more important than divine imperatives. Chesterton, of course, did the same 40 years later. Like Chesterton too, Ernest Hellow's Catholic perspective gives life, science and art a prophetic quality, not in the sense of foretelling, but through forthright truth-telling. Words and ideas, the thoughtful journalist tools of trade, were important to Ernest Hello. He highlighted in his collection the importance of truthful, well-chosen words. He understood the power of the popular media, which was the press of his day. It involved, he said, twin responsibilities which we seem to have forgotten. Journalists should be careful to publish the truth, and readers, in turn, have a responsibility. We should demand the truth and not be fobbed off with anything else. Hello insisted that God and truth were unity, and therefore any attempt to separate the divine from the temporal was bound to fail. Emily highlighted that in education aspect this morning. The further the separation, the greater the disaster. Hello explored this separation in various chapters in the book. Almost 150 years after he wrote, after 2 world wars, a multitude of murderous totalitarian states, and now an alarming rise in family breakdown together with widespread anxieties, anger and addictions, it's time to question the separation of the divine and temporal realms and seek to reunite them. This is our work, but if we succeed, it won't be our creation. Hello insisted that we can cooperate with God in this work, but not as equal partners. We can only do our work, paradoxically, while resting peacefully in God's sovereignty, confident of the power of his truth. Peace, Ernest Hello reminds us, is victory assured of itself. This is a profound insight. Think of any of the world's persistent trouble spots and you'll find that no side has achieved a complete and assured victory. Whatever victory they've achieved is always provisional, contingent on the next development, the next United Nations decision, the next piece of interference by a foreign nation. Hello championed cooperative effort, discussion rather than suspicion, and warm debate rather than cold silence. He desired the conversion of his opponents. Loving kindness could desire nothing less, given the eternal verities in which we're all embedded. He wrote, "To cure an evil, we must look it in the face." Hello looked various evils in the face, evils that at first glance are not so serious or obvious. Among them are indifference, envy, ignoring severe reality to embrace fanciful ideas, and promoting mediocrity. All of these are relevant to Australia today. He pointed to the cure, the values provided by the creator of unbending, unyielding reality. Always, and I find this encouraging, humanity has the church and her saints, the invisibly working God and severe reality calling us to choose life. I hope life science and art may help someone in their intellectual pilgrimage. Robust truth excited Ernest Hello. He didn't see transcendent truth as oppressive. Instead, it liberates us from confusion, slippery trends, and manipulative disinformation. A postmodern pilgrim may benefit from Hello's frequent reminders that humans are receivers of truth, not its constructors. Our adventure in life science and art, very broadly defined to include all our activities, is to discover and explore the truth we encounter. The misadventure of imagining that we create truths is not given to us. It's forbidden. It is pride's misguided attempt at autonomy. We are finite creatures in a universe not of our making, and if we refuse to submit to the physical and spiritual truths we discover, we will not prosper. Instead, Hello insists, we will die, frustrated and unhappy. A pilgrim artist will find stimulating guidance in his collection. Ernest Hello considered art an interweaving of divine ideals, especially beauty, with time and place. When art is cheapened by ugliness or untruth, it becomes tawdry and falsifying, and forgets the greatness of both art and humanity. This forgetfulness, unfortunately, is widely evident in many forms of contemporary art. I want to emphasise Ernest Hello's emphasis on art, and I'll do so in a roundabout way by talking a little bit about C.S. Lewis. As you know, C.S. Lewis was a great Christian apologist. But in the mid to late 1940s, after he'd written many successful apologetic books and was at the height of his fame across the Anglosphere, Lewis realised that writing apologetics was, in a sense, reinforcing the damaging bifurcation of the Western mind and culture, including his life. And it worried him sick. What worried him is this: there is in every person, in every culture, the realm of reason, calculation, mechanism, analysis and logic. There also exists in every person, in every culture, the realm of myth, imagination, story, art and ritual. Western culture has grown in power because it has emphasised the first realm at the expense of the second realm. Very generally speaking, the post-Enlightenment West values analysis above art, reason above ritual, calculation above story, mechanism above religion. And apologetics belongs primarily to this first realm of logic, reason and analysis. Lewis realised he was reinforcing this distorting bifurcation in himself and in his culture, even as he defended Christianity using argumentation. It was around this time of crisis that he started to write children's stories, the Narnia Chronicles. Lewis wanted, well, more than that, he needed to honour his imaginative needs, the need for story and drama, myth and imagination, and enlarged possibilities. He wanted to end that distorting bifurcation in his life and share the greater integrated vision of what it means to be humans with others. Moreover, he recognised that good art has great impact. It doesn't bypass reason. It sneaks through reason in subtle ways and speaks directly to our heart. There's a reason why Jesus told a lot of stories. Art hits us in ways that argumentation never can. There was none of that bifurcation in Ernest Hello. He honours reason and art, logic and charity, science and story. He wants art to recover its glorious role of presenting truth, goodness and beauty, the very qualities of God, in temporal, tangible forms. Here are a few paragraphs from one of his brief essays on the grandeur of art. It will give you a sense of his voice and style. Art is the remembrance of the universal presence of God. Art is beauty expressed in ways that can be grasped by the senses. It is the form assumed by the ideal under the laws of the natural world. What a great opening paragraph. 3 sentences, an aphorism that could stand beside Pascal's Pensées. He goes on, art is an ascension. Its law is to rise. By its very nature it seeks the eternal types of things and tends towards the ideal. Every artist worthy of the name, helps the human soul to breathe. Art, to a certain extent and at a given moment, is a force which blows the roof off the cave where we crouch imprisoned. What mighty levers does it employ? What massive weights have been placed in its service? Language, music, a mere breath from human lips. Poor fugitive notes, poor syllables caught away by the breeze. How invisible your majesty, how weak you seem, yet you have the power to shake earth to its foundations. And heaven itself stoops to listen to you. In the solemn moments when we yield ourselves to your sway, our soul breathes a purer air. She breathes and she is conscious of herself. She says, yes, my God, I am great and I have forgotten it. Life, science and art is filled with hope. For Ernest Hello, hope together with truth, beauty, peace, justice and life aren't impersonal abstractions. They're intrinsic attributes of a person, God, for whom all things are possible. Hello concluded his book with astonishing hope for humanity. He said this, every human act, even the most impotent, loses its impotence when united to the self-existent. God grants to us and even commands us to accept the glorious productiveness of an activity united to his own. We act in him and our very work is repose in him. There's an irony here that you'll be aware of. All I've said is exposition, commentary and argumentation, even as I've emphasised the much more enchanting realm of creative art. It's time, quickly, to bring in some wonderful art in the form of 5 short lyric poems by E. Cummings, a great critic of modern secularism. And as I read these brief poems, note how your interest level rises, your engagement increases naturally, and you're stimulated in hidden ways that incorporate reason but go far beyond it and go straight to your heart. These poems align in profound ways with Ernest Hello's concerns and values. The first poem I'll read deals with the thoughts that would end all thoughts. Like Ernest Hello, like Chesterton, E. Cummings realised that there were philosophies which would destroy philosophy and harm humanity. These were nihilism, materialism, especially dialectical materialism expressed through communism, relativism, and the crassness of determinism. Here is E. Cummings writing about 50 years ago. Now does our world descend the path to nothingness. Cruel now cancels kind. Friends turn to enemies. Therefore lament my dream and don a doer's doom. Create is now contrive. Imagined merely know. Freedom what makes a slave. Therefore my life lie down, and more by most endure all that you never were. Hide, poor dishonoured mind, who thought yourself so wise, and much could understand concerning no and yes. If they've become the same, it's time you unbecame. Where climbing was and bright is darkness and fall. Now wrong's the only right, since brave are cowards all. Therefore despair, my heart, and dive into the dirt. But from this endless end, and briefer each our bliss, where seeing eyes go blind, where lips forget to kiss, where everything's nothing, arise, my soul, and sing. E. Cummings was a very gifted artist. He was an artist for Vanity Fair in the 1930s. They sent him to Bolshevik Russia in 1931. He said he went there without many political convictions at all. He came back with an intense dislike of all bullying collectives. Despite the Bolsheviks' propaganda and attempt to manipulate his visit, he saw immediately that the nation was terrified. It was subject to bizarre and ridiculous worship of hopeless leaders. It was filled with violence and suspicion and the crushing of the individual. He was a lifelong conservative after that. He has a lovely sense of humour, and he wrote this, which unfortunately is relevant today. Comrades die because they're told. Comrades die before they're old. Comrades aren't afraid to die. Comrades don't, and comrades won't, believe in life, and death knows why. All good comrades you can tell by their altruistic smell. Moscow pipes, good comrades dance. Comrades enjoy. Es boy knows boy. The hope that you may mess your pants. Every comrade is a bit of quite unmitigated hate. Travelling in a futile groove, God knows why, and so do I. Because they are afraid to love. The third poem, like Ernest Hello, like Chesterton, E. Cummings, mocked and satirised and had fun with man's pretensions. This is E. Cummings' version of that satire. Pity this busy monster, man unkind not. Progress is a comfortable disease. Your victim, death and life safely beyond, plays with the bigness of his littleness. Electrons deify one razor blade into a mountain range. Lenses extend unwished through curving where when, till unwished returns on its unself. A world of made is not a world of born. Pity poor flesh and trees, poor stars and stones, but never this fine specimen of hypermagical ultra-omnipotence. We doctors know a hopeless case if, listen, there's a hell of a good universe next door. Let's go. The fourth poem, like Ernest Hello, like Chesterton, E. Cummings was a man of great reverence. He was a very humble man. He loved the individual. He loved the overlooked, the neglected, the spat upon. So this is one of his more reverent poems. I think it's almost can sit beside Francis's Canticles. I am a little church, no great cathedral, far from the splendour and squalor of hurrying cities. I do not worry if briefer days grow briefest. I am not sorry when sun and rain make April. My life is the life of the reaper and sower. My prayers are prayers of earth's own clumsily striving, finding and losing and laughing and crying children, whose any sadness or joy is my grief or my sadness. Around me surges a miracle of unceasing birth and glory and death and resurrection. Over my sleeping self float flaming symbols of hope, and I wake to the perfect patience of mountains. I am a little church far from the frantic world with its rapture and anguish, at peace with nature. I do not worry if longer nights grow longest. I am not sorry when silence becomes singing. Winter by spring, I lift my diminutive spire to merciful Him, whose only now is forever, standing erect in the deathless truth of His presence, welcoming humbly His light and proudly His darkness. This is one of my favourite poems, very short. When God decided to invent everything, He took one breath, bigger than a circus tent, and everything began. When man determined to destroy himself, he picked the was of shall, and finding only why, smashed it into because. Contemporary Catholic culture, it seems, has largely failed to regenerate with new artistic works our great heritage of beautiful art, sublime architecture and dignified ritual. We will not impact our culture in the wonderful ways that we could if we continue to neglect art, stories and majestic beauty. Ernest Hallow, like Chesterton and like Lewis, understood that this was a fundamental reality. Thank you.